All right, are we ready? Anytime?
Yes, sir.
Everybody ready? All right,
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, we'll start tonight's City of Olivet's Planning Community Design Commission for December 5th, 2024 to order. Since Sam is not here, Brian, would you mind calling the roll?
Absolutely. Let's see. Member Tim Spiegelglass.
Present.
Member Laura Ragsdale.
Present.
Member Dana Rosenberg. Absent.
Present.
Oh, present. There he is.
Oh.
All right. Look at him sneaking. Member Pichu Powell. Absent. Vice Chairman Brian Lewis. Present. Secretary Sam Wallach. Absent. And Chairman Robert Jagoff.
Present.
All right.
Let it also be known that our city council liaison, Mayor Missy Waldman, is in attendance, as well as Carlos Trejo, Olivet's Planning and Community Design Department Planning Director is in attendance, and Jack. Oh, yes, and Planning and Zoning Administrator, as well as Don Doty, Senior Planner. Carlos, am I missing anybody online?
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Just as a quick introduction, thanks for everybody in attendance. This is great, especially for tonight where we're kind of discussing kind of new amendments and things like that. So we always encourage and like to see fresh and continue and new faces, or not new, fresh and reoccurring faces, I guess. So good. We just so everybody knows, we typically go through the agenda item one by one. If we do have a time for public comments, these are related for items that are not on the agenda. After we go through each agenda item, we'll have a time for public comments. We do ask that everybody limit their public comments to no more than 3 minutes, be respectful of everybody's time, make sure everybody's opinion gets heard. With only 2 people in the audience, I know that's not, as big of a deal as the days where we have a full house, where that becomes more crucial. But we just want to make sure that things stay, things progress and we're not redundant and just move it along. Carlos, do we have any attendees online that we're going to be bringing on?
Online, we currently have none.
None? Okay. If we do, we have some other instructions, but since we don't, we'll skip over those. So Carlos, is there anything else I missed with the instructions?
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll go on to public comments. Is there anybody in the audience today that has a public comment about something that's not on the agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Item A, text amendment, amending section 425.04, submittal requirements, and section 425.05, review procedures for single-family residential structures, being part of chapter 25 community design and community design general of the Olivet Municipal Code.
And Chairman, if sorry for the interruption, but if I can note, Commissioner Rosenberg is now online, video conferencing. If I can note that.
Yeah.
On the roll call, he's now online.
He actually identified himself being present during the roll call. But it's always good,
Video present now.
All right.
Now I understand about the glare issues with the monitors and that. Right, couldn't see, Daniel.
Chairman, are you set?
What's that?
Are you set?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
I'm good for you.
So we had identified 2 items under new business, but given that Commissioner Wallach, who has more of a legal background, and also Commissioner Powell couldn't attend, who has a planning background, we're asking the commission that we're going to withdraw these, but have a discussion on them. So there's a request that no action be taken on the next 2 items.
Sounds great, and I totally agree. I think it'd be great to have their input on this, but I'm glad to kind of see where you guys are at and kind of get some background and get some public discussion too.
So on the regarding the tree protection, preservation, and replacement, based on our last discussion on the 21st, a couple of things that we're asking the commission to do that under the community design requirements, and remember, all new homes are required to go through community design. And that's called out under both under chapter 425, but also in our zoning regulations specifically says new homes are subject to community design review. And that's why we're asking the commission to consider under the community design review to modify the submittal requirements, which currently say, you are to provide a site improvement plan and building construction plans, but to also include a tree preservation, protection, and replacement plan and a landscape plan in there. We've modified the outlining and the arrangements, but essentially under chapter 424, if you're going to apply for a new home, you are now expected to provide a tree preservation, protection, and replacement plan and a landscape plan in there. Right now, it doesn't, while we've been requesting that the petitioners do, it's not required by code. So, well, and it is something that the commission has the authority to make the request in there. So I appreciate that. That's good. So, in addition to that, again, as we're going to add more, we're expanding the pie as opposed to just cutting pieces, but actually expanding the pie and increasing the number of pieces of the staff time that's going to be allotted to these. We did first it was the 8 principles of community design, and then about 8 years ago we started adding stormwater management into the puzzle, and now we're going to add more emphasis and time on tree preservation, protection, and replacement. So we're asking the commission to modify the procedural requirements, which outline the steps that an applicant or petition goes through, and specifically asking that right now, when an application comes in, we have 10 days to make a judgment. And for instance, our meeting in 2 weeks, I think we got 3 new homes and 2 accessory structures. So we can get in, and usually these all come in a specific date and time. In there. So we're asking to increase the amount of time to make that decision from 10 to 15 days. This gives us, 3 weeks to kind of go through the plan set and identifying the plan set, whether everything is in there, what is deficient or what is incomplete. And then if it is declared complete, we make the promise that we would put the applicant before the commission within the 30-day window. Right. In there. Right now, the way the code reads is within 30 days from the second meeting of the commission is your deadline. And we get inundated, on that, for instance, I'm going to use on November 19th, we had 6 applications that came in, and they're all expecting to be on December 19th. Wow. What we're trying to do is change that around so people don't all apply in a single date. Right. And that you can apply at any time, and we'll do our best to get you within 30 days. Well, we will get you within a meeting within 30 days if you are declared complete. If you're deficient, if you're declared as if I have everything that's required for the review.
But you're still, if they turn in everything,
correct,
then you're still required to have it within those 30 days.
That is correct.
Okay.
If it's deficient, then we will get back to them saying, hey, we really can't put you on here at this point. You didn't give us this, like we've got instances we've gotten where we don't have contour information or the correct storm detention information.
Yeah. Okay.
In there. So
it still requires you to quickly go through it to see if they have everything complete. So then,
and if we don't complete our review within that 10 days, it is automatic. Like we're I don't want to say we're required, but the way the code is set, they're placed on the agenda for that next meeting. Gotcha. What we want to do is kind of change that around, saying, wait a minute, if you are complete, we'll get you on there. But if you're not complete, you'll get some information from us. And then when you are complete, you don't have to worry about the dates. We'll get you in the commission within a 30-day period. Okay. Or window. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
It does.
Then it goes to creating what would be a new article in the zoning regulations. It would be identified as Article Roman numeral 22, and there's a reason why we have to go to 22 in there, and that's because all over time, as things have been added to the code and the number and sequences, there wasn't an ideal place to kind of just put this somewhere where it would be associated in the middle. Somewhere, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, the city will recodify our codes, and this will be kind of set somewhere more appropriately or closer. So right now, it's going to be the last chapter of our zoning ordinance, zoning regulations, which is
Okay.
our zoning ordinance in there, and it's going to talk about tree protection, preservation, and replacement. And the purpose of this is it would be applicable to permits for the demolition of new single-family homes, permits for single-family additions in excess of 1,200 square feet, permits for residential accessory structures exceeding 1,200 square feet, and all new single-family homes. If you are doing any of these four, you are now required to submit a tree protection, preservation, and replacement plan, similar to what's called out in chapter 425. In there. These are two independent aspects of it, and they kind of work that way because we have a chapter 400 zoning and we have a chapter 425 community design, and that's why it's kept in separately. The goal here is to limit removal of significant trees, those 20 inches or more, to maintain a 30% canopy outside of the buildable areas, and to minimize the utility displacement in there. Now these, and they're highlighted in red in your staff report, saying these are the numbers we're throwing to you to have that discussion in there and to note. But the way it's currently read, these are the bare minimums here that would be defined. And that's where we were kind of waiting for a little bit more input from the other members in here. Then it would establish the tree protection standards, and it's just define methods of how the trees are to be protected, you know, in there, and what are the things more from an enforcement side that would be reviewed and looked at in that process. And then thirdly, define standards for replacement, including the size of new trees, species, there is replacement, kind of like the replacement ratio, and then some type of escrow to ensure some kind of continuity for a specific time in there. Now, based on our last discussion on November 21st, we look at this process as we get closer to what we may call a tree ordinance, which may be its own chapter within the municipal code or so. And we're looking at it that we're as a three-phase approach. We have these short-term things that we're asking the commission to quickly modify the code that gives us some teeth and be able to apply some of the things that we're hearing are being requested to look into and act on. Secondly, it would be a middle approach where we start, looking at, creating the ideal tree list and enforcement requirements. What are the resources that are going to be necessary, and then a long-term approach of how we would, engage with the council for funding, applicability, and then if we look at some of the other outside of the box type of requirements, like if they, a contribution fund or a tree preservation fund, or even go into other long-range ideals that the commission might want to consider, a tree city USA, those things. So I think we got to look at it that we can't just do it all at once. The comprehensive plan is intended to be implemented over 20 years. And we do know that there's some urgency in there, but I think these would get us in a better position to make those requirements. I think we, from a staffing level, need more education on tree species, types, and those natures. There's a lot of information in there. City needs to do a decision of whether it's going to fund, education and training for the inspectors, or hire an arborist, or whatever, or what department is going to get that. Those are things that are going to happen probably within the next, 1 to 5 years in there. And then long range, how far and broader do we want to take this?
Right.
So that's what you have in here. This is that first phase approach in there. And again, this puts us in a position to now, everybody's got to submit an arborist report. There are defined standards for what has to be within that arborist report. It's kind of outlined on your list. This is now going to be applicable. We first started thinking it was going to be only applied to new construction, new homes in there. And I think that it's a good step, but I have maybe 3 lots that have been demoed and haven't submitted for applications for new homes. And that's okay. You can demo your house in the city of Olivet if you wanted to, in there, as long as you store that. So by waiting till chapter 4, till they submit for a petition of a new home, they could demo the house and take all the trees down. And so we felt we needed to identify this process as part of that. And there that they need to at least tell us what trees are going to be removed and why. That's why we want an arborist report on those.
Yeah. makes
And
sense.
then the other 2 things is, it's not just new single family homes, but I think you've seen the most pools in 1 year period, if not every other meeting, we've had a pool. And, these pools, the flat work, these accessory structures, some of these big additions, they're also removing trees in the process. We haven't applied the same criteria as we do for the new single family homes in there, but I think it warrants, for some of these sizable ones that we start taking that look. And the reason we went with the 1,200 square feet, because under 1,200 square feet, it's consistent with the requirement for engineered stormwater.
Right.
And there, so we're just trying to keep it consistent. It's easier to administer, and it's easier to explain, as you go through a process.
Go ahead, Brian.
I agree with all this, obviously per our conversations, but one of the challenges we've always run into, and I'm not think we're going to solve it tonight, but it's great for bringing this to someone who's going to demo. It's great for bringing it for a pool and renovation. But if I'm correct, somebody could, keep all the trees, build a huge house, and then after it's done, demo them all. And we couldn't. There's nothing worth seeing or stopping. Just a broader question. I'm curious if that's being addressed or dealt with. I'm not sure it should be even. I'm honestly, I'm a little bit at a loss on that one.
Right.
It's their
And
property,
that becomes,
but-
it becomes a good discussion in terms of if the city wants, at this point, not under consideration in phase 1, maybe something that it starts discussing in phase 2 and implemented in a phase 3. But if the city wants to if you want to cut down a tree, you have to pull a permit. I can tell you from my department, we don't want to be the enforcers of that.
No,
We have our own, but I think it might be a good discussion for the city that if they want to fund an arborist that has generates their salary through some revenue of a permit for trees. I mean, that it's worth that discussion. I don't think that that's the right solution.
Sure.
At least not right now.
Not right now.
You know.
I just
Mhm.
just think to put it in people's minds for another time.
But we also, to piggyback on your comment, if somebody's planning an addition and they are aware of this standard, we have no recourse if they go ahead 6 months before, demo all the trees in that space or in that area.
And that's a good point, because one of the things we had talked about is like we have, like aerials for every decennial. In there, and we could look at that. The city of Olivet adopts the 2018, or there are more current aerials, but we were using the county's aerials for the longest time, so they changed them a couple of weeks ago. But that the 2018 aerials would be used as the identification of what trees were in place. But it's very difficult to try to, when you get a cluster, or a lot of times these aerials are taken in the fall so they can get the greatest visibility of the ground. Like, is that a tree? I could see the shadow, but you can't tell the size. And if they're in a cluster, you can't tell, is that 1 or 2 trees? It's really hard to tell.
Why not use Google Maps or Google Earth?
It's the same thing. I mean, if you
Don't
look,
they update them?
yes. But
So it's not just the 2018, like now I think you're seeing.
so
to fit
Daniel,
the
bear
range
with me.
of-
Well, regardless of which one or what year you would go with, let's see, yeah.
Oh, so they're looking at both of those. Okay, I get it.
One second. Did I close all the? I can't see tabs down here. Ah, there it is. Daniel, I'm not sure if you're going to see this screen.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So let's say if we go to Google and look at a specific property. I'm going to go to the one that's being subdivided on Old Bonham. That's between Lynn and
Yeah.
It's 2020.
and Jacqueline, yeah. And they gave us a pretty good arborist report. But when you look at the arborist report and trying to configure how
Right.
many trees are right here, that's pretty difficult in there. Now you could do a canopy study and look at the canopy, and that's why we threw that 30% out there, but it may be difficult to kind of verify at this time and what date that aerial was. The county used to do a pretty good job that you could go in and specifically tell it what year of aerials you want to look at. Now, we've downloaded all those aerials in there, so we could set up any specific date. I mean, if the commission, the quality of the aerials got better by 2000s, but if you wanted to use the 1980s, we have the aerial of the 1980s as a base point. If that was to be, I would say 2018, only because the quality of the aerials was really good. These newest ones are not bad either. These are 2022, and this is again, I'm going to go back just so that you have an idea of what those views are of that Lynn Court Jacqueline property. And now, if you look at this,
Wow.
and then you look at this,
Wow.
so it's not as there's really no great ideal
Can you
in there,
put,
but you could still at least make out a canopy here.
yeah.
Here, if I was going to calculate that canopy, that would be completely different.
But is it also possible by season? Because that's, I'm not sure when Google Maps or when these arrows
Yeah.
are taken. If it's taken in December, your canopy is gonna be very different than July.
Well, and this is also at an angle.
So we can't always alter what year the aerial from Google comes from. We can control it whenever we get it from a static resource like the county,
Yeah.
or even Mistis or something like
Do
that.
you mean month versus year? Or do you mean year actually? What month
No,
do you get it?
Yes, and well, both
Okay.
month and year. So Google, they also apply graphics to fill in things. So like you saw with the sheen on the leaves and stuff, it didn't obviously look like Minecraft, when they took the
Yeah.
picture, but as you get in, and because of the 3D, it gives a texture that you can't delineate very clearly, and you certainly can't. We have more control, you could say, over the counties and images that we can get. But like as far as the months, we are a little tied, like whether it's a Google image or if it's a county image, especially going back historically, because we can't just retake those pictures or refly that drone.
Right.
But yeah, so it's a new technology.
Yeah.
So
It would probably be pretty difficult to, I mean, you could estimate percentage of canopies.
Well, that's what like the canopy percentage that we had shown from and oh my gosh, I am blanking on the resource that we use, but it was, so I have a federal it was the national tree canopy coverage in our last meeting, I want to say. And so it gave us an average percentage of tree coverage per lot of around 30%. So there it is, we do have a capability of distilling it down to numbers. However, it's not as easy to write that into the code to guarantee the canopy coverage for new plantings to replace old, mature trees.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Would an arborist be able to tell us what that canopy would be to get to a 30%? If you gave them a list of trees, would they be able to tell that?
I believe so.
Okay.
I know in Clayton, they have a system, they actually have a program where you enter the tree types and all that, and it'll calculate, what it would be in a specific time period. They got that through a consultant in there. And they presented to the ICMA, the local ICMA group.
I just don't want it to be so complicated that a normal person can't look at this and say, hey, this is what I gotta replace. That's what I'm looking for as a
Well,
dumb general contractor. How do I get past this?
Well, and it goes down to two things, and it's like what the direction here that from a staff perspective is that the principal concern was that there's a lot of trees being removed with new construction. There is also a discussion about the city should protect all trees in there, and I think that this before you tonight is not going to do that. I don't think it's going to be, in there. And again, I'm going to go to the council liaison. The council's direction was not to do a tree ordinance. There are other communities where you're going to cut a tree, you got to go get a permit.
By tree ordinance, you mean specifically dealing with trees that are existing, not talking about during construction, not talking about new development. You're talking about just the general tree ordinance around any destruction.
I can, in my home, I ended up over 20 years cutting down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trees because they ended up really aging and dying or weather hit them and untwined them and burned them. And if you want to control that from the residents, and then you have an ordinance that says you want to do anything with a tree on your property, you need to go through the following, which is pulling a permit, providing whatever is required under the requirements to show the reason why and but for. I'm not into that kind of control over people on their private property. You've heard me, I like to see more brick. To me, I like to see the aesthetics. Trees do grow, trees die, you plant new ones. I will say I planted 2 new trees after we pulled a bunch. I had one tree, it was a beautiful tree, and it got about this wide. Weather came, snapped that baby. So, it's a private decision in my opinion, and that's been the position of the council. We don't need to go to that extreme.
And there's a couple of things, and again, I think it's important to hear that from the liaison. That decision was probably, I think, when we had a discussion with the council, it's well over a year. We just adopted our new comprehensive plan in February, and the council hasn't had an opportunity to talk about the new values and where we're going to go with this. So what we're trying to manage through this process is I need to get something that I know that the council's going to approve in there. And it's a baby increment, it's baby steps, but it needs to get done in there. But I do think based on the comprehensive plan update, the discussion is getting closer to, a tree type of ordinance. It's not about tree preservation. My department through buildings and inspections is trying to set the standards of, when permits are pulled, how are we going to look at the trees that are involved and how are they going to be protected and replaced?
I haven't looked through the details of this. Do we have a formula for how many trees are being removed?
No, not at this
How
point.
do we,
We're still looking at what is the best approach, and we looked at some of the other communities. We have the scale from the table we've seen a couple of times from all the other communities in there. Right now, I don't think we're set, I think that's the discussion I want to have with the commission is like, what is the best number? In there. I think the direction that you guys gave us, go find out and gather data and get it to us.
Yeah.
In there. And, so at our meeting on the 21st, I think we gave you 5 or 6 cities. In there, we've updated the table.
Remember that.
But to do that analysis, there was a,
Okay.
oh, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
So, but it was similar to a packet of information that I distributed to the commission several months ago. We added 2 more cities, I think, at the direction that the commission had asked us to take a look at.
If you could forward that to me,
Absolutely.
that'd be great. Yeah.
And and the report is online, I believe, too. So again, I think it's getting us, I think that it discussions about trees in general in the community and their preservation and their protection is a broader document, is a broader discussion. And this is, again, looking at new construction and the impact it's having right now. And hopefully giving the commission, not giving the commission, but using the code as a means to say, no, it has to be this, in there, as opposed to trying to be very, saying, well, kind of, I don't use the term arbitrary, but we're making the decisions as, well, I guess you're right, here it is at this time or so. I think this will give you more of a backing, and for staff, more backbone to say, no, you're going to have to do this. Well, it's required. So
Is the 30% going to be a minimum?
we're throwing that number out as probably the ideal, and that how we got to that 30% was going back to Don doing an analysis through some federal, websites that look at canopies and what was the typical for all of that.
And then I'm sorry.
I just, so if the lot is no trees on it when they demoed it, now are we gonna require them to have 30% canopy? Is that what
We
we're
would
saying?
require them, yes, not on day one, but that they would provide plantings that,
Eventually would get to
would
that,
up to a 30%
even though,
coverage.
And
even
how
though
many-
when they bought the lot, it was empty.
That is correct.
Okay.
In how many years?
That we need to have that discussion. I think it's going to be pendant on the types of trees we want to promote. Some would be fast growing, some are slow growing, so it just depends on what tree list that we come up with.
Gotcha.
But for us, as we're looking at we're having discussions about the tree list, I have to be I got good building inspectors, and in Don is probably our closest to a tree expert that we have. In there. So it is, I need to consider, this list has to be, I'm trying to think of it. I have to keep it simple.
Yes.
I can't expect a building inspector to know 30 different species into account. I
We
need,
need to keep it simple for the contractors.
and boy, yeah.
Otherwise we're just setting ourselves up for, you're setting yourself up for conflict.
Now, and we learned from the past, you take Oak Estates, planting the same tree all over and then having an event that happens that impact trees and, like the galls and all that is not in the best interest. So we do need a variety. And I would like to keep it simple for the purposes for the inspections department and us to make sure we can manage it and oversee it well. But I also do think that there should be a process that if somebody wants to go beyond the first 5 or whatever, I mean, that I would rely on the commission saying, if you want to do something outside of the box, that there's a way or a venue to do so. And that might be coming back to you saying, instead of doing these ashes, I want to do these. Is that okay? And I would bring that to you to make that decision, as they're going through that process.
Yeah. So we all have to become experts.
Well, but I get a little bit more, a mixture of resources and professional backgrounds to kind of take a look at that. saying that, and again, somebody for some reason might want to go and has a preference on a specific type of tree and it
Right.
wasn't on the list. And, I do think that, we should have some clear guidelines that it should be native or sized or something. But if, every once in a while, something unique, someone comes up, looks at the rules and comes up with something unique. And it's like, there has to be a process that they can make that call it an argument or justification for. And I think that's what a site plan review we're going through the commission is for. It's no different that if I want to build a house that's less than 50% brick, the code allows me to come in but I need to explain why.
Yeah, makes sense. Do we also need a list of prohibited trees, invasive or,
Again, you can, but then it starts getting really complex. I think that there's lots of lists of trees that are not recommended in Missouri or the area in there, but then you have a list of we'll allow these trees, we won't allow any of these trees, and maybe it is worthwhile, or
at least some short list.
but then
you
it
know,
becomes, I need to be able to educate and inform staff,
what those.
contractors,
And-
and all that.
I would think a list of must be one of these 5 or 10 simple, maybe recommend ones we wouldn't recommend, but not a prohibit. Because I think it also comes down to, again, they buy the house, they build the house. 2 days later, they could put in any one of those, and we're not putting anything around that. So I think giving them education is good, but we don't want your staff's not arborists. They don't want to be.
Right.
So let me address something, just because it happened to be something that my neighbor had a conversation with me about. He tore down all his trees, all of them. And he said to me, given our weather and our climate, he does not want a tree anywhere near his house, near his garage, nothing. He will not plant new trees because he's not interested in that tree eventually becoming tall like the one that I ended up shaking and worrying was going to fall in my garage and my car this year that I finally paid for and got rid of. So, while we're talking about this, I understand what people want, and I'm not here to say it is or isn't a good thing. But, this gentleman made me aware of something that, I wasn't really thinking about. I mean, consciously, I was getting rid of my trees, but they were because they were dying and putting a risk to my home. And when he did, well, Tammy's like, oh, that was such a beautiful tree. We had a conversation with him and says, I don't want anything. And so, the mentality of other people, maybe someone coming in, moving into our community, again, the focus of what we can say or have in a recommendation or an ordinance, again, mindful that when that person moves in, they can just ex-nay it all. And so, this is a hard balance because it's people and their private choice. When it comes to the trees and what do we want to do? Yes, do we want to maybe create something that if there's people that want a tree in their yard and begin to learn how to nurture something in their yard, is that something to encourage? But it's what people would want and ask for. So, I don't have skin in this game. It's just, that was an aha moment for me, for my neighbor, and how many others may feel that exact same way.
I'm just gonna counter that. If somebody builds a house that's nobody likes, we would have a problem with it, even though they want to build it. So you are living in a community. So it does impact. And I'm not sure how I understand your point, but we do have a community, aspect to it as well. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I guess my concern is moving from a neighborhood that had really large like older trees. And having to pay to have two removed. To where I'm at now, and when we moved, there was a Bradford pear right next to a beautiful brand new patio. And I walked around that Bradford pear like 4 times and there was a split in the trunk. And I personally said to my husband, that tree's coming out. If we buy this house, that tree is coming out. And he's like, what? I go, it's got a split in the trunk. It's a Bradford pear and it will go with the first major storm. And he's like, okay. And I said, if we write it in our contract, we write it in our contract. If not, my cousin Mike will come take it down because it's not that big. And he's like, whatever you want to do. I haven't replaced it. It's not that I don't want a tree. I just haven't replaced it. So I go both ways. I see it like, you know, I'm not opposed to having trees. I think looking at preserving trees is a good idea, but I also don't want, like, when I had to have the tree removed, I don't want to have to come pull a permit to have a tree removed on my property. Like the one tree in the front of the old house, I had somebody come look at it because I knew it was dying. The guy literally took a pocket knife and like poked it and his whole hand went in and he's like, this needs to come out in this week. And I was like, and it was leaning towards the neighbor's house. And it had always leaned. And he's like, yeah, it needs to go this week. And so, I mean, thousands of, like, right, thousands later. And all he did was drop it. And thousands. And I was just like, okay. So I don't want, like, had I had to pull a permit, I mean, that would have been a couple weeks probably. And if we would have had a major storm, like it could have like destroyed their house, then, I mean, like, that's my concern. Like, do I think it's a good idea to look at preservation of trees? Yes. Do I think that there should be some regulations for like new construction and not just taking all the trees down and having it? Yes, but once they buy the house, they can take them down.
Well, that's what this ordinance is not going to do that,
Right,
you know?
right,
This is only focusing in on construction and
right. But that was
renovation.
talked about before, like having a possibility of adding that later. And so I don't want, I mean, I
Well,
just want to
but-
put that
and
out there
I
as
think
well.
that's a very good point.
Yeah.
But thank
Yeah.
goodness we don't
Yeah.
have to go through
Yeah.
that right now
Well,
because
Sure.
that will be a more challenging
For sure.
discussion.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I may not be the best to try to explain this in there, but there is, I mean, what you're kind of discussing and some of the things that are getting in here, those are policy discussions. And those type of discussions happen at the, you know, at the council level. They make those decisions. What's within our realm or sphere of influence is during new construction, they have to come before you. And what we're proposing here is for these significant construction activities along with demolitions, because you don't see demolitions, is based on the comprehensive plan update. Based what we've heard is that there is concern about the removal of trees. And the same, it's applicable to subdivisions too. I'm not saying that in there. What isn't in this is whether the city wants to create enforcement, tree protection standards universally. When that discussion was between the commission and the council, I believe was clear that that's not what they're looking for in there. And that's okay. I think having that discussion is good, having the commission continuing to urge the council maybe to consider, and maybe we find some medium in there, but that's not what's before you for now. What's before you for now is what under the current process, under the current staffing, this is within our realm to be able to control.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Tim, you had some comments.
So I feel like it's the coverage and everything. I think that is very hard to comprehend and do everything. I think that is stepping it. I'd like to bring it down to very simple things. And way I'd like to see it is, hey, you do a border around the house of construction and you say, hey, anything that's outside that border, you need to keep pending an arborist report that says those trees are bad. Okay. And then outside of that is whatever you take out of that building area that you propose, then you do 1 for 1 of the trees. And you make it very, very simple. And you also require that landscape plan too as well. That's kind of where I am with it, is make it very simple for everybody, for them and for the contractors, that it's very defined. And I think the coverage is very subjective, to say the least, and it's going to be subjective.
Daniel has his hand raised.
Daniel, go ahead. Sorry about that, Daniel.
No, that's all good.
So yeah, Tim, I like what you said there. If it's 1 for 1, but I mean, it's like, is it gonna be a 1 for 1 for, like this big 75-year-old tree comes out, but then you replace it with like a sapling or something that will eventually grow into that? Like, where do you draw the line at the 1 to 1 on that?
Gonna have to be a ratio. I would
Right,
think.
it's some kind of a
You know,
ratio that
depending on
does,
the size of the tree that's going out.
right, and
And
you have
maybe
to,
it's the size of the good trees that are going out, not the size of all the trees that are going out. Because if it's if it's a tree that's already dying, do we make them replace that one? Does that make sense? I don't know.
I would say is maybe like how many inches that, if the tree is 20 inches, you gotta replace it with the tree that's gonna be eventually 20 inches or two combinations of two 10-inch trees.
Yeah.
Something like that, that is very definable.
Yeah, and I believe there has to be some type of threshold. I mean, if one of the things, that we're looking at and trying to find how best to approach this is when you have, existing homes where they haven't done maintenance in a long time, which includes interior and exterior, and ultimately the best and highest use or return for them is to tear them down in there. And developers take the risk to buy those homes, in there with the assumption, hey, I'm going to build the house I want or whatever, and they may not in there, but that's the risk, part of the risk that they take. The same thing is with the both the man-made type of improvements, but also the natural improvements that are on the lot. So if you bought a lot that has just bad stormwater or is the culprit to creating bad stormwater, it's now your responsibility to address it through as you go through our process. And there's the same thing, if you bought a lot and you had, 5 unhealthy trees, but that's what you bought, and the expectation under the current code is that you're going to have to replace those, or you're going to remove them anyway. But that does not exempt you from replacing those. Now, every ordinance and everything should have an opportunity to request some type of relief in there. And that's what, we do that routinely through the commission. But I think, in there, it should be, I don't want to say, 1 to 1, but just because the health is bad or so, that should not exempt you from having to do that. Now, then there also should be, I
What
think
if it's an invasive tree?
you bought it, our code's public, and that's a risk you took, and again, we don't want you to replace it with another invasive tree. We may, through the arborist report or through the decision of the commission or staff recommendation, and say, that's an invasive tree, we would like you to remove that and replace it. Our tree stand, here's our list of standard trees, and
Yeah.
and and I could see where somewhere down the road or even through this amendment that could become, I mean, more of a routine requirement over time.
Okay.
I mean, at that point, and then again, it gets to this, who's going to be the tree expert? Who's going to be assigned to, yeah, and that is like, it becomes to that extent.
Right. I understand.
We need to take public comments, and obviously we're waiting for Sam Petrie.
Yeah. I think if nobody else has any more comments or discussion,
I had one more.
go ahead.
So yeah, for the additions, I think that seems logical for the 1,200 square feet, but I'm just kind of thinking like, we might have somebody who has a 900 square foot addition who is going to need to rip out 10 trees, and then somebody with a 2,000 square foot addition who wasn't planning on ripping out any. So, I mean, we could come across a situation like that. And are we okay with that? Or, I mean, maybe that scenario is like way out of whack. I don't know.
Imagine we're just trying to, it's, both those are possible, but I imagine we're trying to shoot to the best happy medium, because we don't want every single person to have to do it if it doesn't make sense. But we're not gonna be 100% perfect every time, and I don't think we want to. Exactly, and we don't want everyone to have to do that, so I think 1,200 sounds logical, and doesn't mean we can't adjust if we find too many
Yeah.
Well,
bad
And that
situations.
it matches the stormwater requirements too, which, and I think we could always, for anything less, we can always provide recommendations and guidance like we do for best, best practices.
1,200 square feet is a big addition. I mean, that's a sizable addition on a house. Anything less than that, you're not doing as big. I mean, you're not getting as much plans and different things like that. Once you get up to that level, that's a sizable one that
It
you're
makes
spending money.
sense to be able to hire.
Right, to be able to
arborists.
hire another arborist, and
Yeah.
you're already doing consultants, where a small little addition, you may not really have those consultants on it.
Right, makes sense.
And again, looking at the tiering of, short-term, mid-term, long-term. I mean, that could be a mid-term, long-term that if you have there was one community that had, I forgot the term that they used, but they were designated trees. And if your tree was, 28 inches or larger, it's I think they use the term significant tree.
Heritage trees.
Heritage tree. Yeah, and
Chesterfield.
if you're gonna touch those, whether it was through the permitting process or cut them down, that there was an expectation that, that you either get a permit or you replace it, it's in there. And again, if a developer comes in, just like knowing, you had a 28-inch tree, it was in our ordinance, you bought the property anyway. And therefore the expectation is now when they're doing that smaller addition or so, yeah, that we'd have to think about that one a little bit more, but I see what you're saying.
I kind
And
of
it
like
happens.
I kind of like it, treating it similar to the stormwater, if it's anything less, we recommend, implement best practices. And if it gives them the flexibility to do that, without hiring an arborist to increase the cost for a small little addition that they're putting on. Otherwise, I think it gets cost prohibitive to do anything. And then eventually, people are gonna either move out or they're not gonna take care of their homes, and then it becomes another tear down.
And would that then be administrative decision as a result of it being less than that? And it puts it back on you and the training and the knowledge of your staff?
It depends.
Yeah,
I mean,
Okay,
and you think
so-
about it, I mean, if you're gonna do 1,200 square feet, I mean, you're dealing with professionals at that point. Everybody has their own seal. And they're under 1,200 square feet and even up to like, I'll even throw out 4, there's some requirements for those, but at that point, you're dealing with somebody that, is the lowest bid,
Right,
that they're the lowest bid for a specific purpose.
right.
One more question I forgot to ask so are we gonna require that to be a sealed landscape plan?
I'm open.
What
I mean,
I think
I do
everything
not
else
think,
has-
I do not think,
What do you mean?
I do not think so. So a sealed land, it's by a landscape professional and everything. And they're signing on, just like a structural engineer or whatever, they're signing on it that's the best thing, but
Do you
you're
see
going
that?
to, yes, on bigger projects, but you're going to a big company, like you're not going to a small little landscape company where most of these guys are gonna be using, a mom and pop.
Your
company,
arborist is
right.
probably gonna be doing your landscape plan.
Right, exactly, and
Commercial
they're not gonna be,
developers.
right, it's just different. So I would say no, that's why I was asking that question. I think
would
it's an
just-
additional cost.
Yeah, I concur with that.
Yeah.
Maybe just a license, make sure that they are licensed. Well, we
That would be
already have
nice.
that in-
Yeah,
that would then just be a letter then?
Yeah.
Not a seal, but a letter from an arborist, yeah.
I'm sorry, I just gotta correct it. That's a landscape architect is different than an arborist, and that's a landscape architect would have done that. Yeah. I just want to make sure.
Okay, if there's no other further discussion on this, then I think we should take some public comments on this as well.
And I think the podium should work that way. Get it on the mic. You guys. Oh. It'd be easier for them if we can.
Are there any public comments related to this agenda item? Please remember to state your name and address for the record.
Everyone, I'm Kate Pishon Hellman. My address is 800 North Price Road. And I'm really grateful that you guys are engaging in this conversation about trees. I think it's very important for our community, our environment, and really our home values too. Just, I'm going to be kind of jumping around because I have lots of comments based on the discussion. So just relating to the most recent point regarding the landscape plans, whether they're sealed or not, as long as a certified arborist and not just a landscape architect is doing the plans, I think that's an important distinction, that you have a certified arborist who is trained in evaluating the health of the trees and not just a landscape architect who may or may not be certified as an arborist. A couple of the specific points on the proposal here. Just number 6, it talks about a sequence of tree preservation measures. And I would just encourage doing a little bit more of a dive into the science behind the tree preservation measures. Root pruning is really a terrible, that's a good way to kill a tree, not preserve a tree. And then it also says chemical treatment. And that's a pretty vague term. You can apply chemicals again to kill a tree. And there are some tree inoculations that can help prevent disease, but the science behind them, depending on the disease in the particular tree, is somewhat unconvincing as to their efficacy. So I would just encourage, and I'm happy to provide some more scientific information around tree preservation options for that piece. In here, I see that it's like in red about a protection zone, and the things that I have read is that for protecting trees, you want to have a minimum of 1 foot per 1 inch of tree diameter. So like you're creating a buffer zone around it, and best practices are to have 1 foot for every 1 inch of tree diameter. There was a question about, invasive trees, and while there are definitely a list, and the list of invasive trees kind of varies from aggressively invasive, noxious species, Bradford calorie pears, those, I think if you're going to put one on the do not plant or please remove, that would be a tree to put on there because it is invasive and it's dangerous, notoriously dangerous for exactly what Laura was talking about, splitting down the center and falling on structures. And then looking at the species of trees, certainly a preference for native trees would be ideal, given their better success. They're better oriented for success in our climate. And a great resource for those is the Missouri Department of Conservation. They have a easy list that's readily accessible for that. Now, if you're only wanting a list of 10 to 15 trees, then you'd have to certainly narrow that down because there's 10 to 15 different species of oaks. But it could be that it's a broader scope rather than a specific genus and species. One of the things that I think is interesting, and definitely hope to hear this conversation continue after this particular conversation about this code is finished, is the conversation about what do we do for the trees that are removed, either outside of the scope of permitting, or if you have somebody who just doesn't like raking leaves and they decide to cut all their trees down for that purpose. Certainly no easy answers to that, but definitely worth a conversation to see what could potentially be done, and I'm glad to hear that that's happening. I also think there's a huge element of education for the community, a good opportunity to educate our community on trees, the benefits of trees, as well as the risks, and to have conversations with people about the fears that they might have about trees, like the neighbor that Missy referenced, and whether those fears are founded in science or personal preference. Trying to find a nice way to say that. Yeah, let me see if there's anything else I have here. Oh, the tree replacement section. It seems here again, this is I think Brian, you brought this up, or no, Tim maybe brought it up, the one-to-one replacement. I think some kind of easy reference like that is a good way to go, and a one-to-one replacement would, I think, be beneficial. And then also looking at the plantings perhaps happening at being finished at occupancy rather than 12 months after the removal. Or maybe it's occupancy 12 months, whichever comes first, something like that. Just so that the builders are committed, finished, trees are in the ground before the project is finished and closed out.
Kind of pushing the time, so.
Yep,
Is there
I'm done.
anything? Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Thank you.
I am Susan Colhagen, and I'm at 27 Forsythia Lane. And like Kate, I'm very excited that you're talking about all this, and that Carlos and Don and your team have done so much to move it along. A lot of my concern was similar to Kate's, was that requiring the plantings, like it can be up to 12 months after. I think it could be really easy to lose track of it. So it seems to me that you require things before somebody can move in, if you're going to enforce something. And that maybe in order to get their escrow back or whatever it is that that keeps you from, you can let the people occupy it, but maybe a 1 to 2 year relook at the property to see that they maintained it. And then after that, you can't control everybody and what they're gonna do, but it could be that, and that gives trees a start too. And it seems to me that the arborist could be really huge in talking about what would be adequate replacements. There might even be some properties, and it sounds like I haven't studied the other ordinances, some of the other people that I know have, but sometimes they even use bushes and other ways to try to make up for what you took down. And so I like the idea of having, some kind of point system. And I think since so many other places and cities around us have done this, why can't Olivet do it? Why can't we just use what, one or, or combine 1 or 2 other cities? If they can do it, we can do it. And it shouldn't be that difficult. And I don't think you all have to be experts on trees, because you have this arborist that is going to be telling you all that. So anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. And I'm thrilled that you're getting going on it. So thank you.
Appreciate the comments. Thank you. All right, Carlos, is there anybody online?
No, there is not.
All right, so that being said, any further discussion at this point in time? What's that? No. So we're gonna move on to the next agenda item. And I'm not going to read the entire line this time. We'll move on to the next text amendment. Carlos.
Carlos, if he cares.
Or
So recently in the past, I wanted to say month, maybe month and a half, staff received a petition for a new monument sign located at Carrollton Bank, which is located in the light industrial district. Carrollton Bank actually was before the commission earlier this year for their changes internally that they're doing. And we just brought it to make you guys aware of what that commercial project. But so they came to us with requesting 2 monument signs, and the code currently, which is in front of you, but states in the packet that monument signs, each business lot with a continuous frontage of at least 200 feet measured along one street line, one street line only, or a lot area of 3 acres or more is entitled to 1 monument sign with the sign limitation of 25 square feet and a height of no greater than 6 feet. So they were petitioning for 2, and with the code currently, they would not be allowed for 2. So we're coming before, no lot would be subject to 2 monument signs. Everything within the light industrial district is only allowed 1 monument sign, and those lots are only allowed a monument sign if you are over, or if you have 200 feet of continuous street frontage, or your parcel is 3 acres or more.
Does the fact that it's a different street change the contiguous or continuous?
No, and this is weird because this is the same Dealman Industrial Court.
Oh,
Yeah,
it is.
it's just, it just runs the whole way through
Yeah,
there.
I,
So we asked Carrollton if they were willing to come back, if we could take this to the commission, ask if there was something that we could change within the code to allow for 2 monument signs. So we kind of sat back to discuss and came up with the addition of adding a second monument sign that would be subject to the following conditions. Oh, I can drive this. So real quick, this is what the sign will look like. They proposed 1 here and 1 here. But since it's Dealman Industrial Court, we thought it was feasible because people would be coming off of Dealman, and then people can still come off of Price or off of Olive and drive the other way and still see the signage. Do I just click to go to the next slide? Oh, the scroll wheel. Okay, so Don put together these great maps that show all of the different parcels that are located with the light industrial, or located within the light industrial district. So everything that's in the lighter salmon color are lots that are less than 3 acres, and everything that's in the darker red is the 3 acres or greater. You can see the code segment down below is what was currently in place for monument signs. And then there were 15 parcels of the 72 that would qualify for being 3 acres or more. Here is a map that is going off of the linear frontage. So you can see that there's 29 parcels that have more than 300 feet along the street frontage. There's 19 or 18 or 16, right? 16 that fit with the 200 to 299 frontage, and then the numbers go down with the lower frontage. But 45 of the 72 parcels would qualify. And then out of that, with the new code or the new, discussion item, was that 29 of those 72 parcels would qualify for having the 2 monument signs being over that 300 frontage. So with the conditions, we've noted that the lots with continuous street frontage of over 300 feet may petition for a second monument sign, that second monument sign would then be subject to site plan review. So we would bring that second sign before you, the commission, to look at its aesthetics, see if there's anything else necessary, if it's, for instance, too much signage. However, the limitation, it would still be limited by that 25 square feet and the height of no greater than 6 feet for both of those monument signs. And then that any additional monument sign, an additional monument sign may be allowed, provided that the signs are positioned on the opposite sides of the street frontage or with a minimum distance of 200 feet in between them, so that they're not too close in proximity. This is just, a small excerpt of the sign code. We want to go back through it and adjust all of the sign code, maybe provide a sign master plan in the future, something to look at all of these signs. But this is just something that we wanted to address for Carrollton. They've already been issued for the first sign, so we wanted to bring it to the commission for the possibility of then down the line allowing for that second monument sign, because they wanted to push for that second monument sign.
I think it makes sense.
I think it does. The only thing I would want to see added is that it has to be at an entrance. That you can't put 2 just randomly in your lot, that
Next
they
to each
should
other.
be next to well, he's covered
Yeah.
so far away from each
Yeah.
other, which is correct, but I think, they should be at an entrance, that they should have 2 entrances coming in.
Or a corner.
It could be long enough that there's 2 different
But I
entrances
feel
or
like,
something.
yeah, I
Like,
feel like if there was at a corner, they're just gonna have 1.
Well, in some cases, you would have a company that would want their monument at the corner and directionals only at their entrances.
Like
But do you want to be
McDonald's or-
directionals be different?
Yeah, that would fit
than
under a
monument?
different
It would,
classification.
but the monument, well, like, so
But
if
then you'd
you-
only have
if you
one monument
res-
sign in my mind.
I suppose, it is, well, okay, I guess I'm trying to play devil's advocate
No,
in
it's
certain
good.
ways,
Good.
No, you're right.
because I just feel that, restricting it, I mean, with the 200 feet distance between monument signs, that would allow them a greater flexibility to place it on their property without the overcrowding. But I mean, I do see what you mean. I don't know. That's why
I
I'm
think
not
we're
a
talking,
commissioner.
if it's, this is only an issue if there's two monument signs, because we think my McDonald's up here, they have one in the corner.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But they don't want a second one. We wouldn't even apply based off the size and things like that. So those that it would apply, I imagine they're not just talking corner. I think what you're
Well,
talking about.
I mean, if you thought of, I mean, if you, I don't know, you could make an argument that, like, say 9321. If they wanted to put monument signs at the corners. And they were not at entrances.
And I think if that happens, then they should come before us and say, hey, we want to
That's
do something different and this is why. And I think
okay. It's up to you.
it's up to them.
Under this
It's
is
actually just a.
under this would be that the second sign would always be coming before the commission. We would have that discussion.
Okay.
And because it would be subject to that site plan review. And then, like, for instance, for Carrollton, like the way that they have it is that this is an entrance. They have one here, they have one here. But then I think I would agree with Tim when you were saying that they would be, they could always still have those directional signs or different forms of signage that still fit within that light industrial district. So we're trying to just make it so that the monument signs to allow for some LID properties to have multiple monument signs if it seems fit.
Makes sense. I see both points. Um, um, and I think right now with this Carrollton, I mean, it's obvious that should be allowed, and it makes sense. And I think we'll just have to see how it goes to see what, if we need to amendment later.
Yeah, and down the line, we're planning, to go into the sign code, look at everything. For instance, if there's some sort of discussion of having if they have too much wall signs, what happens if Carrollton has all of this wall signage then, and then they have these two monument signs, like what happens when there's too much signage? So that's why also having it come before you, the commission can also designate, have more of a say in with the design and what's currently proposed.
While you're going through it, if you brainstorm, come up with an idea, then let's try to incorporate, if we can.
Absolutely.
And that way we don't have to, we'll address it at that point.
So can I ask a question? Have we had any businesses prior ask for this that would meet this current measurable condition of over 300 feet? And with this change, do you anticipate that other businesses that are in this map of colors, 300 feet or more, would end up beginning to come back to the city and ask for this new signage?
I think the one that was willing to bring this back to the commission, this is probably one in there. What we've seen though is they're no longer industrial parks, and our facilities here in both Dealman Industrial and North Price and even in Bauer have become more commerce service oriented buildings. Where if you're in industrial parks or you're making widgets, it really wasn't important to be visible. But now we have people like the Artery, we have ImageNet, we have, we had Enterprise, where the term industrial no longer applies, and they're businesses that could even operate off of Olive in there, but they're in all our, what we call our industrial parks. And there, so I think we are going to see more and more businesses look at that as part of their image or visibility, and this gives us at least that first step.
I think it's great.
Good.
Yeah.
And this applies only to the light industrial, but other parts, like I'm thinking like where the Aldi's is now, for example.
That's a good question. The code takes that into account. So a development like that is a planned development district. It's its own little muni code that is applied to there, and
That
they-
whole complex and how it's there.
correct. So they
'Cause they have
they're
to be within the rules of even what the builder would want, the developer would want. probably.
correct. So
Okay.
they've provided a what I'll term like a master plan, and Jack, Mr. Carlos will kind of reference to that in there. So you've seen a lot of their images and the signage types in there. What we use to evaluate that on the commission's behalf is, okay, here's the current code, how far are they, or how, and things kind of balanced out. And some of those were more, there was identification of the community, there was identification of the development itself, and then identification of the tenants.
Okay.
So that one was pretty complex. I mean, that's probably the more complex one, but we've had others, 9666 Olive Boulevard, which is the Olivet Executive Center. We changed the code so they could identify multiple tenants and not just the building itself or one tenant. That's the way the old code was used to read in there. So I think, the COR district or the corridor along Olive Boulevard has other flexibilities to be able to do things like that already in place. What we didn't do or hadn't made any changes had been to our industrial park. Nobody had asked. It was industrial. But now we're starting to see, a lot of different businesses that are coming in there.
That people go to. visit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Great drawing, whoever did it. I'm not sure. Very impressive.
Faster.
Yeah, it's great. Before we move on, is there anybody in the public that wishes to make a public comment?
Signage.
Seeing none, we will move on unless there's any further discussion.
Nope.
Okay. And we'll move on to I see something here. Short-term rental.
Short-term rentals.
Other business.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm not sure if you were at the I'm not sure if it was a November 21st meeting or the first meeting of the month.
It was the first meeting of the month.
yeah,
that I
Yeah,
was-
so we had a
Yeah.
trustee bring a concern regarding operation of short-term rentals in their subdivision. And it has not been the first time. We've also had other calls in there. So I pulled out a report from 2021 because the commission did take a look back there on October 7th, 2021. You have a copy of that report, but it's something that I think we're hearing more concerns about their operations. And some subdivisions looking for the city to be the guiding force of regulating them in there. In regards to what's going on, like, or what is the process? So I know of 2 or 3 events in which some type of public safety was required to address issues regarding short-term rentals. One, there was a gentleman there's a short-term rental on Watsonia where he had a medical issue and an ambulance had to go and pick up. One on Hilltop in Arrowhead neighborhood where there was concerns about noise and over occupancy in there. And then I know, and then we did get a complaint about another one on Watsonia that we addressed, and it was a leased out to an individual while the owner was still present or there in there. So how we kind of look at these under the current code is they're not prohibited and they're not defined specifically. A lot of our apartment complexes and even some condos allow short-term rental use of those units. What our code requires is that anytime there is a change in occupants, not a change in owners, but a change in occupancy, you are required an occupancy inspection. that costs you $95 and it's good until, you know, there's another change in occupants. So if somebody wanted to operate an Airbnb in the city, it's like every time you have a change in occupants or every weekend, you should be petitioning and getting an occupancy inspection. And the
But that
When is
doesn't happen.
majority, correct.
Okay, like, I mean, pragmatically, and I
Correct.
saw the map up here, we do Airbnb shows, we do have a few in all of
Correct. And it is difficult. You can narrow it down and get to a specific, but it's not like until you commit that you find, okay, there's the property, let's, you know, in there. Two of them we kind of identified because we knew about the improvements that were inside. It's like, okay, this is it. I think we got, you know, and there. And the other one was because there was a call in there. If there are more, it's hard. But you know, that map that you see is what we see, and it's just kind of like it's bubbled in somewhere around here.
Yeah.
It's not very specific, and until you get really close to committing that we're going to lease this, then it throws you an address in there. So far, I haven't been successful. I didn't want to run a credit card transaction.
You wanna pay to stay.
Day and night.
Yeah, stay.
But I did have a discussion with one where we received a report of concern in there, and the owner lived in the house, and she leased out, you know, a section in the house in the neighborhood she was at, and she was kind of in the southeast corner of Olive, and the typical occupant was a person that would stay there to go visit their family at
McKnight Place.
yes, but what is the senior home?
McKnight.
Yeah,
Or the Canterbury,
the Gatesworth.
Gates.
Yeah. You know, during there, but they always occupied the house. So we did look at some other communities, and we've seen an occasion where the person doesn't even live there. The owner does not live there at all. They just lease this out. And then you have others where the occupant is actually there, but they're leasing out, you know, a basement, a spare bedroom or something in there. So we've seen other communities, and you have references on how they've handled, like there are 3 different situations in there. But again, I think it's something we need to take a look at. I don't have, you know, an answer or recommendation yet. I have to go back through to take a look at those. We also have to be cognizant, you know, at the last summer's legislature, and I'm sure it's going to come up again. There were specific legislators that were looking to limit cities from being able to regulate Airbnbs.
Really?
In there. Yes, because in the end, fundamentally, when it gets down to into zoning, it is a residential use. I mean, and conservative courts have decided that it is no different if your district is called SR, single family residential, and it's being used for residential. What's the problem? It's no different on how group homes they've applied group homes in there. There are residential uses.
But they're long term.
Correct, but not necessarily the tenants all the time either. So a group or an operation may function. And there are some other similar type of uses like that.
Has it, I guess I'm curious, like some communities like that are very like when I was in Denver or something like that, some of the neighborhoods hated the Airbnbs because they were such a popular destination that people are coming in, they're loud or they're leaving trash or, you know, all those concerns. Have we had a lot of complaints about it? Because I didn't think of all of it as
I'll put it this way, in terms of those that are reported through dispatch, which is the official thing, is no. Now, those that people come in and complain and say, yes, you know, after the fact or
what are the concerns or complaints?
So I know that it was my HOA who came and spoke, and we had a Airbnb operating, on the one street, and the police were there every couple days for different incidences.
but those, I just want to make sure, because I'll ask for those reports. We're being told no.
Well, I know they were
If,
there.
if the cops are there, then those reports, and the council needs to be aware of those because I wasn't.
Yeah,
And
the
that
police were
that
there
is-
multiple times.
Same,
There's-
the same.
For the same, they had rented it for either a 3-month or a 6-month period. And this is why it was discussed at our annual HOA, because it was very difficult to enforce, and they wanted to put them out, and it was like this whole ordeal.
But the police were there for the same tenant.
Tenant.
See, that's
Mm,
interesting, because you said multiple times, I'm like, that's crazy that
Yeah,
you would have
yeah.
multiple tenants in a row.
No,
But if
it was
the-
the same tenant,
and-
and it was multiple things,
My-
like,
But those are
loud,
monthly rental
like-
that you're saying.
Yeah, that's.
Right.
That wouldn't be a
That's
Yeah,
short.
not-
3 months. That's like long-term rental. That is not.
that's what I was, that was my
and
thing. It
however,
was
it
more of a
could be any
long
neighbor,
term,
it's
but
Crazy, that's.
the person has
Yeah.
done,
Could be.
that was a
Could be
long
you.
term, but they've also done shorter term, like a 2-week stay. They've done like less than a month. That was the long term, and that was the most problematic. I think the person just got very comfortable there, in my personal opinion. I don't really know, because it's not right next door to me. But I do know that the police were there quite often having conversations with the gentleman.
Now, if it's the one I'm thinking of, number 8 Queensbrook, I know that there was a rental and the person had to get evicted and
It's
tried
not
to
8.
involve
Yeah, I
the
guess
city and that.
And the reason I ask is if it's not not to say we shouldn't put ordinance or situate or think about things that are a problem, but I am one who uses Airbnbs and I find them to be of great value and for family and to hotels. So my initial thought is maybe we look at it, maybe we regulate it. I'm open to that. But I would be hard pressed to not allow it at all personally, unless I felt the community was really pushing for that.
I think some of it is taking that step and looking at it, at what are the issues? And I think in a situation like when the police are called and all that, we should know where they're at. We should know who operates them.
Yeah.
That was our,
Whether it is in our interest to, speaking as an inspector, do I need to know every occupant? Because in a hotel, I can access a log if I needed to, but I don't need that log every time in there. And for us, the most important thing is the public safety.
Yeah.
And while I don't need to be there every weekend or every change in occupant, I do need to ensure that the smoke detectors are operating properly. They weren't beat up or kicked out, that maybe there should be, an inspection every 3 months just to make sure. And it's not about operating to create a revenue source. It's about just ensuring that the place is safe and things are running.
and
and-
my takeaway from my HOA meeting wasn't that we don't want to see them. We want some kind of regulation, like personally, like in our neighborhood, because like the one that you said was the number 8, that the ban having to evict the person out. That one was a whole different situation. This long-term one was, we want to see like, okay, if you're gonna do this, that there is some kind of regulation, and that I guess that somebody knows that like, yes, this is happening in the neighborhood, and that people are aware that it is a rental, I guess, and that especially if the police are being called multiple times.
So here's what we're seeing. If you have a swimming pool, if you have something that allows for outdoor entertainment, that is where we're seeing I just call them B&Bs. This is where we're seeing the issues of noise and things consistently going on, late night, defiance. And I've not asked for police reports related to that, but I am familiar with on the north side of the city, in a subdivision that literally butts where I grew up in Indian Meadows, there were parties, there was noise, they had a swimming pool, they had basketball court, they had hot tubs. So, to me, It's what does this home offer? And if it offers those outside activities, more particularly in the warm and summer weather, that's when I hear more of, are they allowed? Can we really do that? Can they really do it? And by the time we become aware of it, or the city becomes aware of it, they're gone because the weekend's over.
But then we might be able to stop them from.
Yeah, I don't have the
from-
answer.
From,
But it should be up to the owner of the house. And if you're, if
But
you're
everything
getting a
happens so
license from.
fast. It
That's where we
happens
struggle
so
with, like,
fast.
Like,
Yeah.
what's to say that this person can do it, but this one can't and this one can't? So like, we just wanted like clarification, from, like, can we set a limit of like, it needs to be a 6-month rental, or it needs to be a minimum rental? And with the legislation, I don't know that there can be. I mean, you might have to wait and see what happens there. I don't know. I also know that, I don't know if anybody has seen it, like you're speaking of like the pools, people are now renting their pools out for the day.
Oh, yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
I
That's
saw
a thing.
that.
That's absolutely a thing.
Yeah, I saw this past summer. I was like, what?
But I think that all should be a permit that you should go to it somehow, that the city, just like you said, should know that it's going on.
Right.
Not about the revenue, but about the safety, and say, hey, every 3 months, and then you have the owner's name. And if there's problems at that, or the time, at least you're getting a hold of the owner, you're not getting a hold of,
And
you
maybe
know,
we
the
limit
tenant that's
the amount
gone.
of them, or maybe, I don't know.
And there's different tiers I've seen, and you'll see them in the communities identified. There are the Airbnb or short-term rentals in which you're gonna be a co-occupant with the owner. In there, and they note that, it has to be owner occupied, and they can, post a bedroom, they can't post the house in there. Kind of hard to try to enforce, but it can be done, and it's a mechanism. And then there's those that it's not, the owner is not going to be occupying the place. They may have purchased it for the purposes of creating the revenue. And at what point does 1 day to 3 months to 6 months to 1 year, when does it, at what point does it no longer become a rental or treated like a rental property? Well, it's going to be the one that's going to have the most occupant. The goal of our occupancy process is to ensure that the next tenant is in a safe and comfortable environment. So, something has to be, some communities have just said specifically no. If it's not owner occupied, then no. Others have created procedures or processes where they're licensed and go through a system. And it could be a special permit where they have to get go through the public hearing process, get an adopted ordinance, get it recorded, type of thing, and boom.
Are you saying, because this is why I continue to call it an Airbnb, because I'm talking about the 1, 2, 3 day, we're here, we're having fun, we're out of here, in the city. We just said that, and there was gun shootings and stuff like that. So to me, they are two different things. And to me, the concern is more of the kind of Airbnb kind of a style and format. And how does that really, how does that really get enforced? The owner of that home, you're an Airbnb, and thus here's the permit, here's the process. And then they're the responsible party as the owner of the property to constantly request a new permit for a new weekend interested party for an Airbnb. I mean,
I like the idea of a special permit.
Right, every 3 months you get an inspection or
Yeah.
whatever. We're
Yeah.
not gonna do it every time.
so on the short-term rentals and Airbnb, I find those to be two different things, because when people have fires or floods, I've got a gentleman living across the street from me in a rental property that is short-term for him. His insurance is paying for it. While his home in Ladue is being repaired from the flood, from the creek. And to me, that's a short-term rental, and he's a decent guy, so to me, what I think I was really hearing was more the concern of B&Bs, and I'm not sure, but as a trustee, and as a councilman, you know, we hear these things and they're not always reported to the police. They come to us and they're asking us for, hey, help with this problem. So
If we had a special permit, couldn't we, like any other business, restrict, noise levels or activities?
It's a
outdoors?
contract, and it's kind of like a ordinance is not a contract, but it's kind of like a contract in terms that the city can set specific criteria that they have to agree upon. And the goal is to mitigate any of the adverse impacts that would happen to
And
surrounding
and
property.
if we found they were in violation of it, we pulled a special permit. so
Does
then
the
they can
city
no
always
longer rent
reserves the
again.
right to remove?
Like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, it's tough to enforce because again, unless you're putting credit cards out there and you're staying out on nights, but if you find out they're out of
Well,
violation.
And when you look at those sites, if you play the role of, okay, I want to put, my property up, register my property as an Airbnb, it has notations about being cognizant of city ordinances and restrictions and things of that.
Yeah.
In there, and they also do promote, but I don't know what type of mechanism they have and how they enforce.
Daniel's
compliance.
been, sorry to interrupt. Daniel's been patiently waiting, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Brian, you said you were just at an Airbnb in, I think you said Denver. I mean, did you notice things like um a rule book of rules for the house that you were in, or a posting on the window of a responsible party to call in case something happens in a house? I mean,
Every
there's
single Airbnb I go into, and I've been in dozens probably, they always have a phone number to call for things. And then they usually often list, please be considerate of our neighborhood, please be, but this is life, of course. You could list 1,000 pleases, don't do this, no noise after 9 PM in our community. But people will be people, and there could easily be, now that's no different than anyone in your neighborhood could also be out having a crazy party on Saturday night. But 30 new people coming in is more likely to have a bad apple than it is one neighbor. If you have a bad neighbor, that's a different conversation, different problem, but it's a longer term problem. I understand the concern for it.
Nobody wants, the owners of these places don't want those parties
Nope,
either.
they don't either.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're restricting that too as well.
And
Yeah. Right,
Yep.
right, absolutely. Right.
Well, because I've seen it where they'll say on the rentals, when you go to rent, they say this house cannot be used for parties. This house cannot be used for bachelor parties. Used not be used. Not that all of it's necessarily the destination for this versus other places. I know it's the hot bachelorette pads, but you're right. I mean, somebody who's like visiting and they're like, great, I'm visiting my kids in college, or I'm gonna come down, but I want a pool and I want this. It doesn't stop them from being there late. But it's also hotels similar. I mean, I don't know. That's why are we really hearing problems, or it sounds like you might be, but yeah.
I've stayed in a number of them because with 4 kids
Yeah,
traveling and
hate
going to,
hotels.
it's just so much easier to rent, a house, or everyone has their rooms. We've been in some that have like sound measurements in there. And if the levels reach a certain level, the owner gets notified. So there's technology that's out there, to,
measures the sound, so he will get notified if that.
Over 190 decibels or
something like 90 decibels, yeah. And
But there's
I don't see it in all of them, but
Yeah,
I
never
have seen it in a few, Right. And I think too, if we had it, with, like the neighborhood, that could be helpful by mandating something like that in a special permit.
I just have a general question about Airbnb, but for instance, when do you make an account on Airbnb, correct? And then do you get rated
Oh, yeah.
after how you
Yes.
stay?
Absolutely.
So then also, if I were to rent out my place, do I get to see the people's rating before I accept them, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So then
you
I'm,
decline it.
yeah. So what I'm thinking is, I don't know why we would want to punish a homeowner who's willing to do that if seems like it's solely on, like, for instance, the 1 to 3 day rentals in those issues that are occurring. It seems like that would be on the person who's staying there, which is kind of out of the control of the homeowner, unless they were able to see the rating and everything before and deny that person.
But doesn't mean they've always gotten a bad rating, doesn't mean
Yeah.
that anyone noticed, because they could have. And I think to Missy's point, like, by the time we find out about it, they're gone.
Yeah.
And that person's never renting maybe in all of it again, and to have recourse. I like the special permit idea.
But
I
why,
think-
why would we want to have a special permit and then we would pull it from the homeowner if,
If they
Because
keep-
they're not controlling their
exactly.
home.
but what's there to say? I have a party at my home, at the Airbnb. I rent out an Airbnb. I throw this crazy rager party and then the next day we're all out.
Mhm.
Why would I have if the homeowner didn't know anything about that was occurring, why would the homeowner be penalized for that?
I don't think we're
Because they're
talking about like a
responsible for
one-time
their house.
situation. We're talking about recurrence. We're talking about.
Yeah.
Not like a one.
Okay. So not just like a one-time thing, but if they were to,
Yeah.
okay. But then I
If
just,
I was out of town, if
what
I
you're
was
saying,
out of town
yeah.
and my kids threw a
Yeah.
big party,
yeah.
I would have neighbors come, you know.
Yeah. No,
You're
I
responsible.
Yes,
You're
yes.
responsible.
just saying if it happens, I just feel like that's kind of
Yeah,
out
not a
of
one-time
the,
thing. No, because but life is life. But yeah.
it's kind of, what's there to say that I have a house? I rent it out, people throw a party. 2 months down the line, I don't know what's happening again. And some people do it again, but now I'm being punished because my special permit's being pulled by the
Then
city.
they need to,
Right, you're not getting your referrals or doing your research on that person, and you're letting that happen in my mind.
But
Or you
then
don't have
Brian's saying the
cameras out.
point of like, it's not, you could have one bad occurrence, of that person. Like I could throw a party, but then I could go to Denver and be visiting my mom or something. And I'm totally fine, just going out to dinner and then going to bed by 10. So
more,
it's like, I don't know how you're gonna,
it's more of
police
a
that.
reason, it's more of a reason to have those noise meters
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
there's no perfect answer to this. This
Yeah.
is just another way to try to avoid having to cancel them completely. But I agree with Missy that I think we're talking about two very different issues when we're talking about Airbnbs and we're talking about long-term rentals. Because to me, long-term rental, I can understand why someone got super comfortable and maybe was a bad neighbor. They weren't versus your person across the street who's like, I'm here, but I'm going to be part of the neighborhood for now. But again, we can rent. I assume we're allowed to rent our houses, no code right now. I mean, we have on my street, there's someone who rents year leases
And the other issue is this too. People don't want to get involved and get enforcement or others involved because there is such, anger and they're afraid of what are the consequences if I really do something. Again, I'm going to go back to, this is where they come to the council or the trustee and express themselves because they're not going to call the police or they're not going to do something that exact evening because what's the retribution going to be? How many times has somebody just gone over and killed their neighbor? We are reading and hearing this stuff almost daily. And that is another, I'll just call it vicarious trauma our world is in. And we end up being those that they come to because they know we're not going to hurt them versus making that call. And that is an honest fear.
but they want you to do something about it.
Right.
And that's, I used to serve on my neighborhood and there were so many people that would come out to tell me problems, but they wouldn't go talk to the neighbors direct. And they didn't want me to mention who said.
Said it.
Yeah.
You said it.
that's fun.
Yes. It's a awkward position to be in.
From experience.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I,
Hear it all the time.
all right. I like the special permit idea. I think everybody seems to be nodding their heads, but I'm sure I would love to hear Sam's opinion on this as well. And Petrie's,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, we do need to do public comments. Is anyone in the audience? No, okay.
And we do not have anybody online.
Nobody online? Okay. Is there any further discussion or have we,
You beat it.
yeah. All right, good, good. All right, so we'll move on to meeting minutes. Are there any meeting minutes that we have been presented with? So no meeting minutes, so we'll move on to reports. Missy? Oh, no, Carlos, sorry. I was trying to move it along.
I'll start on the east side of town. Audi's going great. They should be, I think they're within a 60-day window, or I think less. and it's been the weather, they did some paving up there before it got too cold and, but the rest of it shouldn't be too bad at this point. And there, next door to that site what we call lot 3, which is a small retail building. There was an article in the Post yesterday, I believe, that identified a tenant called the Brass Tap that is looking at that site. So you have the Paris Baguette on the western side, which is by Hilltop, and then the Brass Tap on the eastern side, which is closer to the ramps in there. Yeah, kind of a brewery concept.
The bar, it's a franchise.
Wow,
So, yes, first one in Missouri
really good.
in there. So
Fantastic.
it'll be interesting. I think. Well, I think for our perspective, and I think the mayor knows. You know, if you go back to 2000, 2010, and there, you know, we would hear, you know, the first entrance into the St. Louis region had to be Brentwood, Richmond Heights, Clayton, and that corridor. And
Wow.
all of that has turned things around, and maybe it's a broader thing, but I think something we should be proud of. You know, Paris Baguette, first one in the St. Louis area, Brass Tap, first one in the St. Louis area. Either that sphere has expanded or it's shifted in there. So it's a good thing to be a center of it also.
Yeah.
Just want to
Sugar Fire.
Put Doho in there, Sugar Fire, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, and
Domo, I'm sorry.
the apartment complex in the Irvington, the old Irvington Rhyme area, they're doing a lot of the footings. It's kind of neat. I need to get an aerial shot so you could see the footprint in there, but they are moving pretty quickly on that end. If you go by the old Enterprise building, Emerson has a flag now flying on there. They're doing the interior demolition in there. I ran into the chief person that oversees the group there was already eating at Sugar Fire 2 days ago. So it's kind of funny. It's like, yeah. So, and then as you go closer this way across the street, they were doing some street paving, and they're still working on foundations for the foundations on building 7. It's not going as fast as we wish, but I know that there's a lot of things going on also that the developers involved in there, but they're moving at Snell's place, but it's moving. And we haven't had any other updates beyond Domo at Easy Storage in there, but I was talking with the realtor today, you know, and he said there was some interest in there. The city council had a discussion with the developer across the street, which is at the Oliver, about the progress of the vacant site and getting that moving. And there, I think he's supposed to report back to council in January or February, to give him an update in there. And outside of that, the Centennial Trail is, I mean, it is pretty much all accessible. It's not fully opened yet, but it's a great trail system. And then the GRG did buy the old railroad bed right away to extend it eastward and towards the CVS property. Anything else, Don, you can think of on the development side?
No, you really covered it pretty well. I mean, and we talked about Carrollton Bank earlier, so.
And they're bringing in about 100, a little bit over 100 people to that site. So
Great.
There do seem to be an uptick in commercial occupancy applications. So that signifies some turnover in the office towers. And, you know, not a negative thing, but, you know, they're getting more on a, I guess you could say, routine. Even though we had good relationships, or we have good relationships and have for a long time with the office towers, it is really good to see, you know, more of a pattern emerge and get those spaces filled. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chairman, last thing I'll note, and Daniel also, to take a look at we have the schedule here and before the mayor chimes in, but next week that she's got coffee with the mayor. We will have a meeting on the 19th. It will be a busy meeting. I think we got pretty much 3 new homes, and there may be 2 other petitions, 2 additions. Yeah, so and then our meeting on January 2nd has been canceled. So I just want to make sure. So our first meeting for 2025 will be January 16th.
Very good.
Okay.
Missy?
All right, my guest for Coffee with the Mayor is going to be Jason John, the owner of Domo. There will be no second city council meeting in December. We will be meeting on our one and only meeting in December will be next week. We'll be going over the park fees and structures that was presented to the council last night. May consider 2 readings so that it could be implemented in the beginning of January. They were very, very, very close to their numbers of guesstimates of where they wanted to be. And in the learning lessons of the year, you got some good, information and data to where they came back and wanted to do several things, raise the fees, raise for memberships and for just walk-ins, raise the cost for rentals, the pavilions, and then increase the deposit for damage within the parks and the community center. So those are some things the council will be looking at. I wish everyone a happy, healthy, whatever holiday you have, whatever you celebrate. And we will see you guys on the 19th. And have a great new year. It'll be a great year.
I am surprised you haven't mentioned anything about the success of the turkey trot.
Oh, you are so right. I almost wore the turkey trot hat that I've never worn as an elected official because I would probably embarrass the city, but I'm wearing it next year. That's right. The turkey trot was really a great success. I think it was like 1,968 attendees. All I remember really saying is, wow, we came really close to 2,000.
Yeah.
The first year it was 200. A year 11, we're at almost 2,000. Raised over $25,000 again for the food pantry. I had numerous people that were not from here. Some of the winners from Australia.
Wow.
We had 2 New Zealand,
Two,
top 3
uh,
were 2 from, my sister flew in from New Zealand. And I was shocked that there were other New Zealanders in all of that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
Shouldn't
and
know them.
yeah, and Clayton won the Founders Trophy again. So come on, we got to push on Ladue for next year. Come on. We can't let them do a 4-peat. They just did a 3-peat. But it was a huge, huge, huge success, and appreciation to everyone that showed up, volunteered, did everything to make this again another successful year. We had a lot more sponsors than we've had before. Some of them being the new businesses that are in our community, Easy Storage, Insight, am I saying that right? The Vision place up there. So I just look to continue to have more successes and warm weather, but it didn't rain. The good Lord was on our side for this. We blew all those clouds away. So again, a great event, a great event.
It was amazing to see like a river of people all running down Old Bonham, and to see how many people actually came out to watch it,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. It was very
It,
impressive.
it's on the map, folks. We're on the map. And just like Carlos said, everything commercial is happening in our little triangle of the world. And, it can only be, good for you, for me, for the amenities of what the people want. So I'm looking excited to see what we have in 2025.
Good.
Okay.
Any other comments, discussions? Seeing none, we'll adjourn at 8:54. Thanks.